The sun hung low over the dusty borderlands, painting the horizon in blood-red streaks as if the earth itself were bleeding. In the shadow of a crumbling adobe wall, young Isabella huddled against the cracked ground, her small frame trembling not from the chill of the evening wind, but from the terror gripping her chest. She was just 14, her dark hair matted with sweat and dirt from days of hiding, her wide eyes reflecting the flickering light of a distant campfire. The voices had carried on the breeze, harsh, guttural words in a mix of Spanish and English, laced with the cold precision of men who dealt in death. Isabella had been scavenging for scraps near the old smuggling trail when she stumbled upon them. A cluster of shadowed figures around a battered truck, their faces hidden under wide-brimmed hats, discussing routes and payloads that would flood the nearby towns with poison. "Tomorrow at dawn," one growled, his voice like gravel under tires. "We hit the crossing, take out the patrols and move the shipment. No survivors." Her heart pounded as she pressed herself flatter into the dirt. The metallic tang of fear sharp on her tongue, the acrid smoke from their cigarettes stinging her eyes. If they found her, she'd be silenced forever, just another whisper lost to the wind. The rumble started faint, like thunder rolling in from the desert's edge, a low, mechanical growl that built into a symphony of engines tearing through the silence. Headlights pierced the dusk, slicing through the haze like knives, as a lone motorcycle crested the rise. Its rider, Ethan Harlan, cut an imposing silhouette against the fading light. Broad-shouldered, his leather jacket scarred from years of road and regret, a faded patch on his back reading Iron Vow, the emblem of a brotherhood forged in the fires of forgotten wars. Ethan was no stranger to these border fringes. At 42, he carried the weight of a life etched in loss. His wife taken by illness a decade ago, his only son lost to the same streets these men poisoned. He'd ridden alone for years, chasing ghosts and the echo of a promise made to a dying comrade. Protect the innocent, no matter the cost. Tonight, that vow pulled him here, drawn by a tip from an old contact about trouble brewing. As he slowed his bike, the headlights swept over the Cartel lookout, catching the glint of a rifle barrel. The men scattered like rats, but Ethan didn't flinch. He killed the engine, the sudden quiet amplifying the girl's muffled sob. Dismounting with the grace of a predator, he scanned the shadows, his boots crunching on the gravel. "Hey," he called softly, his voice steady as weathered oak. "You can come out. They're gone." Isabella froze, her breath hitching. Strangers meant danger, but this one. There was something in his eyes, a quiet resolve that cut through her fear like dawn breaking. She emerged slowly, clutching a tattered shawl around her shoulders, her face streaked with tears and dust. Ethan knelt to her level, keeping his distance, his calloused hands open at his sides. The air smelled of sagebrush and exhaust, the distant howl of a coyote underscoring the isolation. "What happened, kid?" he asked, his tone gentle but firm, the kind that had calmed battlefield nerves long ago. She hesitated, glancing toward the campfire's dying embers, then whispered the unthinkable, the cartel's plan, the dawn raid, the lives it would claim, families, friends, entire communities caught in the crossfire. Her words tumbled out in a rush, fueled by desperation, each detail painting a nightmare of impending doom. Ethan's jaw tightened, the lines on his face deepening like cracks in parched earth. He'd seen enough corruption in his days, crooked officials turning blind eyes, borders bleeding with unchecked greed. But this was a spark that could ignite hell. He placed a hand lightly on her shoulder, feeling the tremor there. "You did right telling me," he said. "That changes everything. I promise you, we'll stop them." As the first stars pricked the velvet sky, Ethan helped Isabella to her feet, his mind already racing ahead. He radioed his crew back at the outpost, a tight-knit band of riders who'd sworn the same oaths he had. Veterans, mechanics, men and women who'd chosen loyalty over blood. The Iron Vow wasn't just a club. It was a pact, born from the ashes of battles where promises were the only things that endured. By midnight, engines would roar to life across the state, converging like a steel storm. But for now, in this fragile moment, Ethan focused on the girl before him. He draped his spare jacket over her, the leather warm from the ride, carrying the faint scent of oil and open road. "Stick with me," he murmured, leading her toward his bike. "We're family now." The weight of her trust settled on him like an old scar reopening, but it fueled the fire in his veins. Dawn was coming, and with it, a reckoning, not born of vengeance, but of honor unbroken. They rode through the night, the border's jagged silhouette fading behind them. Isabella clung to Ethan's back, the vibration of the engine a steady lullaby against her exhaustion. He navigated the winding trails with practiced ease, the cool wind whipping past, carrying whispers of sage and distant rain. Memories flickered in his mind. The day he'd buried his son, the graveside vow to shield others from the darkness that had claimed him. Ethan had drifted after that, a lone wolf until the Iron Vow called him back. A network of souls pieced together from broken lives, united by the creed that true strength lay in standing for the voiceless. Isabella's revelation wasn't just intel, it was a lifeline, a chance to redeem the years he'd spent running from his own shadows. By the time they reached the safe house, a weathered ranch on the outskirts, its porch light a beacon in the dark, Ethan's phone buzzed with confirmations. Riders were mobilizing. Old war buddies like Marcus, the grizzled medic who'd patched him up in the sands of forgotten conflicts. Lena, the sharp-eyed navigator whose maps had saved more lives than bullets ever could. They gathered in the dim kitchen, steam rising from mugs of black coffee, the table strewn with hand-drawn sketches of the border crossing. Isabella sat quietly in the corner, a blanket around her, nibbling on bread as Ethan recounted her story. The room hummed with tension, the tick of a wall clock marking the hours until dawn. "We ride quiet," Ethan said, his voice low. "No guns blazing. We alert the good ones on the line, block the paths, expose the rot." Nods rippled around the table. This was their way, justice woven from truth, not chaos. As the group dispersed to prepare, Ethan stepped outside, the pre-dawn chill biting at his skin. He lit a cigarette, the flame briefly illuminating the haunted lines of his face, and stared toward the east, where the first hint of light clawed at the horizon. Isabella joined him, her small hand slipping into his. "You believe me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan exhaled smoke into the night, watching it curl like ghosts. "More than that. I believe in promises. And this one's mine." The engines would start soon, a thunderous chorus echoing their resolve. What began as a girl's desperate whisper would ripple outward, saving dozens from the cartel's shadow, a testament to the quiet power of one soul reaching for another in the dark. Word count, 872. The first rays of dawn sliced through the horizon like hesitant blades, turning the desert sands from silver to gold. But the air still carried the night's chill, sharp as a warning. Ethan stamped out his cigarette under his boot, the ember dying with a faint hiss as the low rumble of approaching engines vibrated through the ground. Isabella's hand tightened in his, her eyes wide with a mix of awe and lingering fear, reflecting the faint glow of the porch light. The safe house, with its peeling white paint and sagging roof, stood as a sentinel amid the scrub brush, a forgotten outpost where secrets were traded like contraband. Inside, the Iron Vow riders were already in motion. Leather creaking, maps folding with crisp snaps, the scent of gun oil mingling with fresh brewed coffee that no one had time to savor. Marcus emerged first, his broad frame filling the doorway. a duffel bag slung over one shoulder. At 50, he moved with the deliberate pace of a man who'd outlived too many sandstorms, his face a map of scars from medic tents where promises were whispered over the dying. "Crews assembling at the ridge," he said, his voice gravelly from years of shouting orders. 20 confirmed, more en route. Lena's got the routes plotted, back ways to flank without drawing heat. Ethan nodded, releasing Isabella's hand gently, his calloused palm lingering a moment to steady her. The girl had changed everything in a single night. Her words weren't just a warning, but a spark, igniting the old vows that bound them. He could feel it in his bones, the pull of that long-ago oath to his comrade, now echoing in the faces around him, faces etched with their own losses, their own redemptions sought on endless roads. Lena stepped out next, her ponytail swinging like a pendulum as she handed Ethan a worn satellite phone. She was the quiet force of the group, 38 and wiry, her eyes sharp as the knives sheathed at her belt. Once a cartographer for ops that blurred lines between right and wrong, she'd found solace in the vow after a betrayal that cost her a partner. "Border Patrol's got a mole," she murmured, glancing at Isabella with a nod of respect. "We can't trust the radios. I'll lead the scouts, get eyes on the crossing before they move." The plan was simple in theory, forged in the heat of necessity. Intercept the shipment without turning the dawn into a bloodbath, expose the cartel's ties to the corrupt badges who looked the other way for a cut. But Ethan knew simplicity was a lie the desert told. Truth demanded sacrifice, and honor walked a razor's edge. Isabella watched them, her small frame swallowed by the oversized jacket, the leather hanging like a shield. She'd never seen anything like this, a family not of blood, but of choice, pieced together from the wreckage of wars and regrets. "What if they come for me?" she asked, her voice threading through the morning hush, fragile as the first light. Ethan knelt again, meeting her gaze, the warmth of the rising sun brushing his back. "They won't. Not while we're riding." It was more than assurance. It was the core of the iron vow, a promise that outlasted rust and rain. He remembered his son's face, too young for the streets that claimed him, and the vow he'd made at that fresh grave. No more innocence lost to shadows. Isabella was that vow made flesh now, her overheard whispers a bridge from his past to this fragile hope. The engines ignited in waves, a chorus building from the ridge-like thunder-gathering force. Ethan helped Isabella onto a spare bike behind Lena, the girl's arms wrapping tentatively around the woman's waist, the vibration humming through them like a shared heartbeat. He mounted his own machine, the familiar weight of the handlebars grounding him, the throttle responding with a growl that spoke of miles yet to come. The convoy formed organically, 20 bikes at first, then 30, headlights flickering on like stars aligning for battle. Dust billowed in their wake as they rolled out, the safe house shrinking in the rear view, a brief sanctuary in a world of shifting sands. Ethan led the point, wind whipping his face, carrying the dry scent of creosote bushes and the faint metallic tang of anticipation. Memories surfaced unbidden. The night his wife faded, her hand in his, as she urged him to keep fighting for what was right, not just survive. He'd failed then, drifting into isolation. But the vow had pulled him back, a lifeline of loyalty. As they crested the first rise, the border sprawled below, a jagged line of barbed wire and watchtowers, the Rio's lazy bend glinting under the climbing sun. Lena peeled off with her scouts, engines fading into the distance, while the main group hung back in the arroyos, shadows among shadows. Ethan pulled over at a vantage point, binoculars to his eyes, scanning the haze. There, movement at the crossing, trucks idling like predators, figures milling with the purposeful gait of men on a timetable. Isabella's details matched perfectly. The dawn timing, the patrols they'd neutralize, but something twisted in his gut, a flicker of doubt, the ethical snare of intervening where laws were bent. Were they vigilantes or guardians? The line blurred in these fringes, where corruption festered like an open wound, officials pocketing bribes while families paid the price. A crackle on the phone broke his reverie, Lena's voice tight with urgency. Eyes on the lead truck, armed heavy, and they've got insiders signaling clear. We need to move now, block the east flank before they roll. Ethan's grip tightened on the device, the plastic creaking. He glanced back at Isabella, her face pale but resolute, the wind tousling her hair. This wasn't just about stopping poison. It was about reclaiming honor from a system that had forsaken it. "Hold position," he replied. "We're coming." The signal rippled through the convoy, throttles revved, a steel tide surging forward. Dust clouds rose like veils, the sun now fully risen, casting long shadows that danced with their resolve. In that moment, as the bikes thundered toward the confrontation, Ethan felt the weight of unspoken legacies. His son's memory, his wife's fading smile, the comrade's dying breath, all converged in the roar around him. Isabella had overheard a plan that could shatter lives, but in telling it, she'd forged a chain of loyalty stronger than any cartel grip. The desert whispered secrets to those who listened, and today it spoke of redemption, not in glory, but in the quiet act of standing firm. The crossing loomed closer, tension coiling like a spring. The first echoes of distant shouts carried on the breeze. Dawn's promise hung in the balance, a moral crossroads where promises would be tested, and the iron vow would either hold or break. The dust devils swirled like restless spirits across the arid plain, kicked up by the convoy's advance, as the iron vow riders closed in on the border crossing. Ethan's bike led the pack, its engine a steady thrum that drowned out the doubts whispering in his mind, the wind slicing through his jacket like a reminder of roads left behind. The sun climbed higher, baking the earth into a shimmering haze where heat waves distorted the watchtowers into ghostly sentinels. Isabella rode with Lena, her small hands gripping the woman's sides. The girl's eyes fixed on the horizon, as if willing the nightmare to dissolve. Behind them, the line of motorcycles stretched like an iron chain. 30 strong now, engines harmonizing in a low growl that echoed off the canyon walls, carrying the faint scent of hot rubber and sun-scorched sage. Ethan signaled a halt at the edge of a dry wash, the group fanning out into cover, bikes idling down to whispers. He dismounted, boots sinking into the loose gravel, and pulled the binoculars from his vest. The crossing lay exposed below, a ribbon of cracked asphalt, flanked by chain-link fences, the river's muddy curve sluggish under the morning glare. Trucks idled there, 3 in total, their cargo beds tarped against prying eyes, men lounging with rifles slung casually, cigarettes dangling from lips curled in smug assurance. Border Patrol vehicles sat idle nearby, officers chatting idly, too idly, their postures betraying the rot Isabella had described. Ethan's stomach twisted. He'd crossed paths with men like that before, badges tarnished by greed, turning borders into sieves for poison that seeped into veins and shattered homes. This wasn't law enforcement. It was complicity, a betrayal of the oaths they'd sworn. Lena slid up beside him, her scout bike still warm, dust caking her jeans. She handed him a small drone controller, its screen flickering to life with grainy footage from her earlier flyover. "Confirmed the payload," she said, her voice a taut wire. "Enough to hit 3 towns hard, and the signal flares. Our insiders are lighting up the all clear." The images showed crates stamped with faded warnings, the kind that hid death in powder form. Isabella dismounted unsteadily, joining them at the overlook, her face pale against the relentless light. She pointed a trembling finger at the screen. "That's them, the one with the red stripe. He's the one who spoke, said no survivors." Her words hung heavy, laced with the raw edge of memory, the campfire's glow still haunting her eyes. Ethan placed a steadying hand on her shoulder, feeling the fragility there, an echo of his own son's innocence lost to similar shadows. Marcus gathered the riders in a tight huddle, his voice cutting through the engine ticks like a field command. "We split! Flank teams block the back roads. Main group draws eyes here. No shots unless they force it. We expose, we record, we call in the clean badges waiting on standby." Nods rippled through the group, faces set in quiet determination. Veterans like Javier, who'd lost a brother to cartel crossfire. Sarah, the former nurse whose clinic had been overrun by the fallout of unchecked shipments. They weren't outlaws. They were the remnants of promises kept, a chosen family stitched from the scars of service and survival. Ethan scanned their eyes, seeing reflections of his own burdens. The grave he'd dug under a grey sky, the comrade's last breath urging him to fight the darkness, not join it. This ride was redemption's thread, pulling them all toward a light dimmed by corruption. As the teams peeled off, Ethan led the main flank toward a narrow ravine that dipped toward the riverbank. The bikes navigated the rocky descent with controlled roars, pebbles skittering like fleeing thoughts. Isabella stayed close on Lena's tail, the girl's resolve hardening with each mile, transforming fear into a quiet fire. The air grew thicker with humidity from the water below, mingled with the oily reek of idling diesels ahead. Ethan's mind raced through contingencies, the ethical bind of crossing into grey zones where intervention could paint them as the villains. But honor demanded action. Silence was the true crime here, letting poison flow while innocence paid. He remembered his wife's words in her final hours, her voice soft as fading embers. "Keep your word, Ethan. It's all we leave behind." That vow anchored him now, a compass in the moral fog. They crested the ravine lip, the crossing mere hundreds of yards away, when the first sign of trouble cracked the air. A sharp whistle, followed by the sputter of a patrol radio gone silent. One of the officers straightened, eyes narrowing toward their dust trail, hand dropping to his holster. The cartel men stirred. Rifles snapping up, the tarp on the lead truck rustling as if alive. Ethan's heart pounded in sync with the accelerating engines around him. "Hold steady!" he barked into the comms, his voice calm amid the rising tension. But inside, doubt clawed. One wrong move, and Dawn's promise could shatter into chaos. Lena veered left, her scouts fanning out to block the escape route, while Marcus's team revved from the right, a pincer of steel and will. Isabella's voice cut through the headset, small but fierce. "They're moving! The red one! He's yelling orders!" Ethan glanced back, seeing her point toward the lead truck lurching forward, tires spinning gravel. The corrupt patrolman waved them through, a traitor's signal clear as day. Adrenaline surged, sharpening every sense, the metallic bite of fear in his mouth, the sun's glare off windshields like accusatory stares. He gunned the throttle, the bike leaping ahead, closing the gap as shouts erupted from the crossing. This was the fulcrum. Expose the rot without becoming it. Uphold the vow that had drawn them from their solitary roads. The convoy surged as one, headlights flashing in warning, a wall of resolve against the tide of greed. Dust billowed like a shroud, engines roaring defiance as the first truck swerved to meet them. Ethan's world narrowed to the path ahead. The weight of lives. Isabella's, his crew's, the dozens she'd saved by speaking, bearing down like the desert sun. Redemption wasn't a blaze, it was this. The steady burn of loyalty tested in the heat. The confrontation loomed, seconds stretching into eternity, where promises would clash with betrayal and the iron vow's true metal would shine or fracture under the unrelenting light. The engine's roar crescendoed into a deafening symphony, dust plumes rising like ancient ghosts summoned from the parched earth as the Iron Vow convoy barreled toward the crossing. Ethan's bike sliced through the haze, the handlebars vibrating under his grip like a pulse quickened by resolve, the sun's glare turning the river into a molten ribbon below. Isabella's voice still echoed in his headset. her warning a tether pulling him forward, her small form a beacon of the innocence they fought to shield. The lead truck lurched ahead, its tires churning gravel in a desperate bid for escape, the red-striped cab a glaring target amid the chaos. Border Patrol lights flickered erratically, some officers hesitating, their faces masks of conflict as the truth of their compromised ranks dawned in the harsh light. Ethan raised a gloved hand, signaling the riders to fan out, forming a living barrier across the asphalt. Marcus veered right, his bike kicking up sprays of sand that stung like accusations, while Lena's scouts closed the flanks, their engines a coordinated growl that boxed in the convoy. The air thickened with the acrid bite of overheated brakes and the sharp tang of fear sweat from the cartel men scrambling atop the trucks. Rifles glinted in the sunlight, but no shots rang out yet. The vow's creed held: expose, don't escalate, let the weight of witnessed betrayal do the unraveling. Ethan killed his engine first, the sudden silence amplifying the shouts from the crossing, boots hitting pavement as the group dismounted in unison, a wall of leather and determination. Isabella slid from Lena's bike, her legs unsteady but her chin lifted, eyes locked on the scene unfolding like a nightmare given form. One cartel enforcer, the gravel-voiced one from her memory, leaped from the truck bed, his wide-brimmed hat casting a shadow over features twisted in rage. "Back off, or you'll regret it," he bellowed, his accent thick as the dust settling around him. But Ethan stepped forward, unyielding, his voice cutting through like a blade, honed by years of quiet command. "We know what you're carrying, and we know who's letting you through." He nodded toward the patrol vehicles where two officers shifted uneasily, hands hovering near radios that crackled with unspoken panic. The girl's testimony burned in his mind, details of routes and payoffs that painted a web of corruption stretching from shadowed camps to polished badges. The standoff stretched taut, seconds elongating under the relentless sun, heat waves shimmering off the tarps like illusions ready to shatter. Javier, the wiry veteran with a limp from old shrapnel, pulled out a compact recorder, its red light blinking steadily as he captured every word, every glance exchanged between the enforcers and their inside men. Sarah flanked him, her medic's kit slung low, ready for the fallout of frayed nerves rather than fresh wounds. She'd seen the aftermath of these shipments in makeshift clinics, families torn by the poison's grip, lives frayed like old ropes. "This ends here," she murmured to no one, her voice a thread of steel in the tension. Ethan felt the echo of his own losses in her eyes, the son whose bright future dimmed under similar shadows, the wife whose final promise urged him to weave justice from the threads of broken oaths. A patrol sergeant broke ranks, his uniform crisp but his face ashen, stepping into the fray with hands raised. "Stand down, all of you," he called, but his eyes darted to the cartel leader, betraying the lie. Ethan met his gaze, the weight of moral crossroads heavy in the air, scented with river mud and exhaust. "You first," Ethan replied, his tone even, laced with the quiet authority of a man who'd stared down worse than greed. "We have proof. Routes, signals, your cut of the take. Call it in clean, or we broadcast it ourselves." The recorder whirred softly, capturing the hesitation, the subtle flinch that spoke volumes. Isabella edged closer to Ethan, her hand brushing his sleeve, a silent affirmation that her whisper had ignited this moment of reckoning. The cartel man snarled, gesturing to his crew, but the momentum shifted as Lena's scouts revved from the sides, blocking the back roads with bikes parked nose to tail, an unbreakable line. Distant sirens wailed, clean reinforcements alerted by the VOW's network, racing from outposts untouched by rot. The enforcer's bluster faltered, his rifle lowering inch by inch as reality pressed in. No escape, no silence to bury the plan. He spat into the dust, the glob dark against the pale ground, and muttered orders to stand down, the truck's engines sputtering to a halt like defeated breaths. Border agents loyal to their true oath swarmed in, cuffing the corrupt alongside the cartel runners, the scene a tableau of unraveling deceit under the climbing sun. Ethan watched it unfold, the knot in his chest easing fractionally. But the victory tasted bittersweet, the ethical scars of intervention lingering like sunburn. They'd saved dozens, perhaps more, from the flood of poison Isabella had overheard, but at what cost to their own shadows? He turned to the girl, kneeling once more, the river's murmur a soothing underscore to the chaos winding down. "You were brave," he said, his voice rough with unspoken gratitude. "That promise I made? It's holding because of you." She nodded, tears carving clean tracks through the dust on her cheeks, the first real smile breaking through like dawn after storm. As the authorities secured the site, hauling away the tainted cargo under watchful eyes, the Iron Vow riders regrouped, engines idling like patient guardians. Marcus clapped Ethan's shoulder, his grizzled face cracking into a rare grin. Vow held true, but this web's bigger, tendrils reaching further. Ethan nodded, scanning the horizon where the desert met sky, endless and unforgiving. The day's light cast long shadows, mirroring the unresolved threads, deeper corruption, perhaps reprisals from those who'd slipped the net. Isabella climbed back onto Lena's bike, part of the family now, her story a bridge to futures reclaimed. They rode out as one, dust trailing like a vow etched in the wind, the border fading behind them. But the ride, the true test of honor, was far from over. If this moment of tension and triumph stirred something in you, hit that like button below. It helps these stories of quiet courage reach more ears in the shadows. Word count, 872. The sun beat down mercilessly on the border crossing, turning the asphalt into a shimmering mirage that blurred the line between victory and vulnerability. Ethan wiped sweat from his brow with the back of his glove, the leather gritty against his skin, as the last of the cartel trucks was towed away under the watchful eyes of federal agents, clean ones, at least, their badges gleaming without the tarnish of compromise. The air hung heavy with the residue of confrontation, the oily scent of idling engines mixing with the faint chemical whiff from the seized cargo, a poison that now sat impounded like a defeated beast. Isabella stood close to Lena, her small frame still dwarfed by the borrowed jacket, but her posture had straightened, as if the weight of her secret had lifted with the rising dust. The Iron Vow riders lingered at the periphery, bikes lined up like silent sentinels, their engines cooling with faint ticks that echoed the slowing pulse of the scene. Ethan's gaze drifted to the horizon, where the desert stretched into infinity, its vastness a reminder that one skirmish didn't sever the roots of corruption. Marcus sidled up, his duffel bag slung low, the medic's instinct still scanning for unseen wounds. "We bought time," he said, his voice low and laced with the gravel of caution. "But those tendrils you mentioned, they're coiling tighter. Words already spreading, our intercept hit their channels like a flare." Ethan nodded, feeling the familiar ache in his chest. The echo of promises made in quieter moments. His son's grave, marked by a simple stone, under an endless sky, whispered of failures past. This intervention was a step toward balancing that ledger, but the ethical fog lingered. Had they overstepped, painting targets on their backs for a system that might spin the tale against them? Loyalty demanded vigilance, not blind faith in badges that bent too easily. Lena approached, her satellite phone clutched tightly, the screen's glow casting sharp shadows on her face. She'd been coordinating with their network, voices from distant outposts filtering through like threads in a web of their own making. "Got a lead," she murmured, pulling Ethan aside near a cluster of creosote bushes, their resinous scent cutting through the haze. The red-striped driver, real name's Victor Reyes. He's low-level, but he name-dropped a handler up the chain. Someone in the state capital, pulling strings from an office with a view. Her eyes flicked to Isabella, who hovered nearby, listening with the quiet intensity of one who'd learned to read dangers in whispers. The girl's revelation had cracked open more than a shipment. It exposed fractures in institutions meant to protect, where justice twisted into self-preservation. Ethan rubbed his jaw, the stubble rasping under his fingers, memories surfacing of his own brushes with authority. Bureaucrats who'd buried reports to save face after his son's case went cold. Poisoned streets overlooked for political expediency. "We can't ride blind," Ethan replied, his tone measured, the weight of command settling like desert heat. "But pushing deeper means risking the family we've built. Isabella's safe for now, but reprisals." He trailed off, glancing at the girl, her dark eyes reflecting a resilience born of survival. She'd overheard not just a plan, but the casual cruelty of men who viewed lives as collateral, and in sharing it, she'd bound herself to their vow. Lena nodded, her ponytail swaying with the motion, a subtle acknowledgement of the moral tightrope they walked. The iron vow wasn't about glory. It was redemption forged in restraint, honoring the fallen by shielding the living without becoming the monsters they fought. Sarah joined them, her nurse's bag zipped tight, having tended to a minor scrape on Javier's arm from the scuffle. "The clean agents are debriefing the witnesses," she said softly. "But we need to vanish before the questions turn on us. I've got a route to the old safe haven, deeper in, off the grid." As the group mounted up, the convoy reformed with purposeful efficiency, engines coughing to life in a staggered rhythm that masked their numbers. Isabella climbed behind Ethan this time, her arms wrapping around his waist with tentative trust. The warmth of her against his back, a stark contrast to the isolation he'd known for years. The bikes rolled out smoothly, weaving through arroyos that carved the landscape like old scars, the river's distant murmur fading into the wind's low howl. Dust trailed them like a veil, the sun dipping toward afternoon, casting elongated shadows that danced with unspoken fears. Ethan's mind churned through the implications. Victor's slip could lead to a bigger fish, but exposing it meant navigating a labyrinth of favors and threats, where one wrong alliance could unravel everything. He thought of his wife, her final days spent urging him to trust in the good that lingered amid the rot, her hand frail but firm in his. That promise echoed now, pulling him toward the capital's underbelly, where corruption hid in plain sight. Hours blurred into the rhythm of the road, the convoy splintering into smaller packs to evade prying eyes, Lena scouting ahead, Marcus covering the rear with Javier and Sarah. They stopped at a forgotten way station, its rusted pumps silent under a canopy of stars beginning to prick the twilight sky. The air cooled, carrying the crisp bite of impending night, mingled with the faint smoke from a small fire Marcus kindled for warmth. Isabella sat cross-legged by the flames, poking at embers with a stick, her face illuminated in flickering gold. "Why do they do it?" she asked, her voice threading through the quiet, directed at no one but heard by all. "The ones with the power? They could stop it, but they don't." Ethan settled beside her, the fire's heat chasing the chill from his bones, and met her gaze. Fear, mostly, or greed. But some, they forget their promises. We don't. The conversation turned to strategy, maps unrolled on the cracked concrete, Lena tracing lines with a weathered finger. Victor's handler tied into a network that funneled payoffs through shell operations, poisoning not just borders, but boardrooms. Exposing it required infiltration, quiet, calculated, leaning on contacts from Ethan's war days. Veterans turned informants who valued honor over hazard pay, but doubt gnawed. Was this justice or vengeance in disguise? Marcus voiced it first, his scarred hands folding the map with deliberate care. "We ride for the voiceless, not to topple empires. One step wrong and Isabella pays the price." The girl looked up, firelight dancing in her eyes, and shook her head. "I already did. This makes it mean something." Her words hung like a vow renewed, binding them tighter, a chosen family forged in the crucible of shared purpose. As night deepened, the stars a canopy of indifferent witnesses, Ethan stepped away to the way station's edge, the desert's silence pressing in. He pulled out an old photo from his wallet, his son, smiling under a clear sky, before the shadows claimed him. The pain was a dull throb now, tempered by the ride's momentum, but it fueled the resolve. No more losses to unchecked greed. Lena's phone buzzed, a tip confirming the handler's next meet, a shadowed warehouse on the city's fringe. They had a window, narrow as a coyote's trail, to strike at the heart. Mounting up under the moon's pale glow, the engines stirred once more, a low thunder rolling toward the lights of civilization. Isabella's grip tightened on Ethan's jacket, her breath steady against the wind. The web's deeper layers awaited, promising ethical storms and tests of loyalty. But the iron vow pressed on. Redemption not in endings, but in the unyielding path forward, where one girl's whisper echoed into a chorus of courage. The moon hung like a tarnished silver coin over the city's fringes, casting elongated shadows across the cracked warehouse district where rusted silos loomed like forgotten giants. Ethan's bike hummed softly as the convoy eased into the industrial sprawl, engines muffled to whispers against the distant hum of traffic on elevated freeways. The air shifted here, thick with the metallic tang of cooling steel and the faint, oily residue from long-shuttered factories, a far cry from the desert's clean bite. Isabella clung to his back, her breath steady now, warmed by the jacket's lining. But her eyes scanned the gloom with the vigilance of one who'd learned to spot threats in every silhouette. The iron vow had splintered further upon approach, Lena and Javier peeling off to scout the perimeter, Marcus and Sarah holding position at a shadowed overpass, their radios linked in a silent web of trust. Ethan killed the engine at the warehouse's chain-link fence, the sudden quiet amplifying the night's subtle symphony, the drip of condensation from overhead pipes, the occasional scuttle of rodents in the underbrush. He dismounted, helping Isabella down with a gentle hand, her boots scraping softly on the gravel-strewn lot. The tip had been solid. Victor's handler, a mid-level fixer named Harlan Crow, was set to meet a supplier inside, sealing deals that funneled cartel gains into legitimate fronts. But Ethan's gut twisted with the ethical undercurrent. This wasn't a border skirmish anymore, but a delve into the heart of institutional rot, where exposing one thread could unravel alliances they'd need for the long haul. His comrade's dying words echoed in the hush. "Protect the line, Ethan. Don't let it blur." Crow wasn't just a cog. He was the lubricant for a machine that ground down the voiceless. And intervening meant walking that blurred line themselves. Lena's voice crackled through the earpiece, low and precise. "Perimeter clear. 2 guards at the side door, smoking and chatting. Main entrance's got a van idling. Likely the supplier." Ethan nodded to himself, motioning Isabella to stay low behind a stack of weathered pallets, their splintered wood rough under her fingers. The girl's face, illuminated faintly by a distant sodium lamp, held a mix of determination and the lingering fragility of her ordeal. The campfire whispers that had set this chain in motion still haunting her gaze. "You did enough back there," Ethan murmured, kneeling to her level, the cool night air brushing his skin like a caution. "This part's on us." But she shook her head, her voice a quiet thread in the dark. "It's my promise, too. They took my home. I won't let them take more." Her words struck like a spark, reminding him of his own forged family, the vow's bonds, woven from losses like his son's, turning solitary riders into a shield. They moved as shadows, Ethan and Lena converging on the side door, while Javier circled wide with a compact camera rig, capturing footage for leverage rather than confrontation. The guards were lax, their conversation drifting on the breeze, fragments of boasts about easy payoffs, voices slurred with complacency. Ethan waited for the lull, then struck with precision born of old training, a swift disarm, cloth over mouths to muffle protests, binding them with zip ties from his kit. No harm, just restraint, the vow's way, justice through exposure, not escalation. Inside, the warehouse yawned vast and echoing, crates stacked like labyrinth walls under harsh fluorescent strips that buzzed like angry hornets. The scent of damp concrete mingled with something sharper, the chemical ghost of illicit processing hidden in plain sight. Crow was there, a slick figure in a tailored coat, pacing near a makeshift table strewn with documents and a laptop's glow. The supplier, a burly man with a scarred neck, nodded as they exchanged envelopes, seals of corruption passing hands like heirlooms. Ethan's heart rate steadied, the moral calculus clear. This was the nexus where border poison met urban veins, families like Isabella's paying the toll. He signaled Lena, who slipped forward with the grace of her scouting days, planting a tiny recorder amid the shadows. Voices carried clearly, mentions of future routes, bribed officials, the very tendrils that had nearly flooded those towns at dawn. Isabella's details wove through it all. The red-striped truck, a mere delivery in a larger scheme, Crow's web spanning from fringes to Capitol halls. Tension coiled as Crow paused, his head tilting like a predator sensing wind shifts. "You hear that?" he muttered, eyes narrowing toward the gloom. The supplier shrugged, but Ethan froze, the weight of exposure pressing like the warehouse's low ceiling. A creak echoed, Javier's boot on loose flooring, and suddenly lights flared, guards from another post bursting in with shouts. Chaos erupted, not in gunfire but a scramble of shouts and shoving, the vow riders emerging from cover to form a human cordon. Ethan stepped into the light, his presence a calm anchor amid the frenzy. "It's over, Crow. We have the tapes, the routes, the names, your meetings. Walk away clean, or it all goes public." Crow's face twisted, a mask of calculated fury cracking under the floodlight's glare, sweat beading on his brow like dew on tainted steel. He glanced at the supplier, who backed toward the van, but Lena blocked the exit, her stance unyielding. "You think you're heroes?" Crow sneered, his voice echoing off the crates, laced with the arrogance of untouchability. "This city's built on deals like these. You expose me, you burn bridges you can't rebuild." Ethan's reply came steady, rooted in the vows that had sustained him through graveside silences and road-weary nights. "We're not here to burn, we're here to light the truth. Your bridges were rotten from the start, built on promises you broke to kids like her." He nodded toward Isabella, who stood at the threshold now, her small figure silhouetted, a symbol of the lives his greed imperiled. The standoff held, breaths ragged in the charged air, until sirens pierced the night, federal cleanup crews, tipped by Marcus's network, converging with lights flashing like judgment's arrival. Crow sagged, the fight draining as agents swarmed, securing documents and cuffing the fixer without a shot fired. The supplier bolted, but was cornered by Javier's precise tackle, the scuffle ending in restraint rather than ruin. Ethan watched it unfold, the ethical release bittersweet. They'd severed a key link, safeguarding dozens more from the cascade Isabella had overheard, but the web's remnants lingered, shadows promising reprisals. Sarah arrived with the rear guard, checking for signs of strain among the crew, her hands steady as she bandaged a superficial cut on Lena's knuckles. As the warehouse cleared, dawn's first grey tinges creeping through high windows, Ethan pulled Isabella aside, the cool morning air filtering in with hints of rain on the wind. "You changed the path," he said, his voice rough with the night's toll, the photo in his wallet a silent witness to his own redemption arc. She looked up, the fear in her eyes tempered by a spark of belonging. "We all did. The promise, it holds." The vow regrouped outside, bikes forming a loose circle under the paling stars, engines stirring like a collective sigh. Marcus clapped shoulders, his grin faint but genuine. One down, but the capital's heart beats on. Ethan mounted up, Isabella behind him once more. The road ahead twisting toward deeper confrontations, tests of loyalty where corruption's core awaited, and the true measure of their honor would be forged in the fires of unyielding resolve. The desert's edge gave way to urban sprawl as they rode out, the city's lights fading in the rear view like embers of a half-quenched blaze. Whispers of greater threats echoed in Ethan's mind. The vow's journey far from its end, bound by the unbreakable thread of a girl's courage and the promises that outlasted the night. The city's underbelly pulsed with the restless hum of neon signs flickering against rain-slicked streets, casting erratic glows on the Iron Vow convoy as they navigated the labyrinth of back alleys toward the state capital's shadowed heart. Ethan's bike led the way, its tires hissing over puddles that mirrored the overcast sky, the air heavy with the scent of wet asphalt and distant exhaust, a far cry from the desert's dry whisper. Isabella's arms encircled his waist, her grip firm now, no longer tentative, as if the night's trials had woven her into the fabric of their chosen bond. Behind them, the riders followed in loose formation, Lena scouting the flanks with her unerring sense of roots, Marcus and Sarah anchoring the rear, Javier's camera still tucked away like a talisman of truths captured. The warehouse takedown had been a victory, Crow's web frayed at the edges, but Ethan's instincts hummed with the certainty that the core, the true architect of the poison's flow, lurked deeper, in marble halls where justice wore a suit and tie. They pulled into a nondescript motel on the city's outskirts, its faded sign buzzing faintly under the drizzle, rooms lit by the warm flicker of lamps through thin curtains. The group dismounted quietly, boots splashing in shallow pools, the engine's final sighs blending with the patter of rain on tin roofs. Inside the cramped lobby, steam rose from styrofoam cups of coffee as they gathered around a scarred wooden table. Maps and notes spread like battle plans from Ethan's war days. Lena's phone lay open, its screen displaying encrypted messages from their network. Veterans and informants piecing together the final thread, the handler's superior, a high-ranking official named Elias Grant, whose office overlooked the Capitol dome, turning blind eyes to cartel streams for personal gain. "He's meeting a contact tomorrow," Lena said, her voice a steady anchor in the dim light, tracing a finger along a highlighted route. "Private club downtown. If we get in, we get the proof. The ledgers, the calls that tie it all back to Isabella's overheard plan." Ethan leaned back in the creaking chair, the motel's musty scent mingling with the bitter brew, his eyes meeting Isabella's across the table. The girl sat with quiet poise, her dark hair drying in loose waves, the borrowed jacket draped over her shoulders like a mantle of belonging. She'd come so far from that huddled shadow by the adobe wall, her whisper evolving into a force that challenged empires built on broken oaths. But doubt flickered in Ethan's chest, the ethical weight pressing like the storm clouds outside. Infiltrating the elite meant crossing into realms where the vow's code of restraint could shatter, turning guardians into ghosts, hunted by the very system they sought to mend. He thought of his son, the boy's laughter silenced by streets poisoned from the top down, and the graveside promise to his wife, to fight not with fists, but with the unyielding light of truth. "We do this clean," he said finally, his voice low and resolute. "No shadows. We expose, then we walk." Dawn broke grey and sodden, the rain easing to a mist that veiled the capital's spires like secrets half-concealed. The convoy splintered once more, bikes stowed in a nearby garage to blend into the urban flow. Lena and Javier posing as delivery staff, their gear hidden under nondescript uniforms, while Marcus and Sarah monitored from a van parked in the club's service alley. Ethan and Isabella approached on foot, the girl's presence a calculated risk. Her face, young and unassuming, could slip past doormen where leather cuts would draw stares. The private club loomed elegant and imposing, its brass doors polished to a gleam, the air inside redolent of polished wood and aged whiskey, a world away from border dust. They lingered in the marble-floored lobby, Ethan in a borrowed suit that chafed against his road-worn frame, Isabella at his side like a niece on a rare outing, her eyes sharp as she scanned for the telltale signs from her memory, the gravelly tones, the coded phrases. Grant arrived fashionably late, a silver-haired figure in a tailored suit, his companion a nondescript businessman whose briefcase likely held more than contracts. They retreated to a private booth, velvet curtains drawing shut like conspiratorial veils. Ethan nodded to Javier, who slipped a micro-recorder through a service vent, the device humming faintly as voices emerged, discussions of shipments rerouted, payoffs laundered through civic projects, the very network Isabella had glimpsed at the campfire now laid bare in damning detail. The border run was a hiccup, Grant's voice carried smooth as silk over steel. But with the new routes, we're golden, no more loose ends like that girl who overheard. Isabella's hand tightened on Ethan's arm, her breath catching, but he steadied her with a glance, the moral fire in his eyes, affirming the vow that had carried them here. Tension built as a waiter passed too close, footsteps echoing on the parquet floor, but the recording held, proof of corruption's pinnacle, ties to officials who'd let poison flood communities for a slice of the pie. Lena's signal buzzed in Ethan's pocket, reinforcements en route, clean investigators from federal oversight, alerted anonymously to converge without the vow's fingerprints. They slipped out as the meeting wrapped, the mist outside cooling their flushed skin, hearts pounding with the thrill of lines uncrossed. Back at the motel, the group listened to the playback in hushed awe, the voices a symphony of downfall. Marcus forwarded the files through secure channels, the web unraveling in real time, raids mounting, arrests rippling upward as Grant's empire crumbled under the weight of exposed oaths betrayed. By midday, news alerts flickered on the lobby TV, headlines of a corruption bust shaking the capital. Shipments seized, families spared the shadow Isabella had fled. Ethan stepped outside, the sun breaking through clouds to gild the wet streets, and lit a cigarette, the smoke curling like released burdens. Isabella joined him, the rain's patter a gentle underscore to her words. "It's over? For real?" He exhaled slowly, watching the vapor dissipate. "For now. But promises like ours, they keep the watch." The crew emerged, clapping shoulders in silent solidarity, their chosen family intact, scars deepened, but spirits unbroken. Lena mapped a route back to the safe house. Marcus checked the bikes with habitual care. Sarah shared a quiet smile with Javier. They'd ridden from a girl's desperate whisper to this moment of quiet triumph, redeeming losses in the act of standing firm. As the convoy formed under clearing skies, engines rumbling to life like a vow renewed, Ethan felt the full measure of their journey. The desert's call, the warehouse shadows, the capital's veiled truths, all converging in redemption's steady glow. Isabella rode with him, the wind drying the last of the mist from her face, her laughter faint but free against the horizon. The road stretched endless, a testament to loyalty's legacy. Not in grand finales, but in the enduring promise to protect, to honor, to choose family amid the ruins. The iron vow rolled on, guardians of the light that corruption couldn't dim, their story a whisper turned thunder, saving dozens and echoing into the quiet courage of tomorrow. Thank you for riding along on this tale of unbreakable promises and chosen bonds. If stories like Ethan's journey of redemption and quiet justice move you, please subscribe and hit the notification bell. We'll keep sharing these northern confessions to light the way through the shadows.